Now joining us on this broadcast is Capt Jim Fanell, who is the former Director of Intelligence and Information Operations for the US Pacific Fleet. Also with me on this broadcast is Victor Sumsky, who is the Senior Expert of ASEAN Centre. He is getting us live, coming us live from Moscow. And Joachim Bitterlich, also former NATO Ambassador, is with us on this broadcast. Gentlemen, I'd like to begin by apologizing if I have mispronounced any of your names. It's inadvertent, and I'd like to begin with Captain Fanell. There is a warning that has come to the fore from Russia. There is going to be nuclear war if there is a third world war. A warning coming into the West, especially against any interference. How do you look at that?
Well, it's a very concerning turn of events, if that's in fact the warning that was made. And so I think when we discuss nuclear warfare or nuclear weapons, there should be a lot of caution. And so I think that's on the one hand. On the other hand, the statement that President Putin made regarding the alert status of his nuclear forces is something that has to be taken seriously. And I think both NATO and the United States, which is part of NATO, are very seriously looking at those forces from an intelligence perspective. We'll understand what their readiness levels are in terms of heightening them, and then they will take appropriate action.
Right. Right now, Mr. Joachim Bitterlich, I'd like you to answer that as well. How do you look at this threat of nuclear escalation that has come to the fore from Putin? Because it's been over a week since the war first started. Ukraine has been putting up a tough fight. The fact that now Putin and Moscow has actually come out and resorted to such kind of warning, is that a sign of desperation that they really haven't been annex Ukraine or get in there for the last 1 week?
I think, first of all, this signal of the threat, of the possible threat of nuclear weapons, I think is a new, and it's a dangerous sign from the Russian side. I think it's dangerous because there is not any interference in the Russian sense by NATO or by the Americans or someone else in the Ukraine. We are helping Ukraine. It's normal against an aggression, something which we have not been observing in the last decade. It's an aggression of a sovereign state against the sovereign state, and therefore I think Russia should immediately stop this war against the Ukrainian people. It's a tragedy which is going on.
How do you read all of this? Because right since the very beginning, Putin, Moscow has been threatening from any kind of intervention from anybody, especially the West. Moscow has been coming out on multiple occasions and warning of consequences to anybody who tried to take sides. Is that one of the reasons why most of the Western world is apprehensive about putting boots on ground and actually giving that kind of military support to Ukraine?
It's easy. For us in Europe, it's unprecedented. We have not seen something like this since 1945. Beside a famous Russian intervention again in Czechoslovakia and even before in Hungary. These were two aggressive interventions against a sovereign state who was trying, let's say, to build up his own future. The Hungarians, as in Czechoslovakia, the same applied. There was only one situation we were able to cross in, let's say, in a civil and in a peaceful way. This was the German reunification. But this is back again, let's call it Russia or the Soviet Union in its own sense, trying to impose his view, its line on the neighborhood. There's a certain paranoia, we know this in Western Europe, in military strategy, even from the Russian side, because they don't want to see others who are not in the same case as they are near their borders. It's known the Russians feel always encircled, but in this case, it's silly. There was no actual intention of the Western world to integrate the Ukraine into NATO. The Ukrainians have been asking now to integrate EU, what the Russians do not like neither. On the other hand, what they see, the Ukrainians, and this is the real tragedy, they see how Poland, their neighbor in the West, has been developing, how Romania has been developing in the last years, and they would like to reach the same. I understand totally these people. They do not want to be part of Russia, where neither economic nor social policy have been showing real progress in the last 30 years.
Right. Right, Victor Sumsky, I want to get you in on this because from the people that we've spoken to here as well, from the sense that we're getting from within Russia for the last couple of days, is also that not many agree with what Putin is doing. There is a sense of disappointment within Russia as well. They too don't see the invasion of Ukraine as the right thing to be done by a government like that. Victor, if you can hear me?
Are you asking me?
Yes. Yes,
Sorry,
sir, go ahead.
is this a question to me? Okay. You know, what amazes me in this situation is that, as far as I can judge by the pronouncements of the other speakers, all this came just out of the sky for the Western world and actually for so many other people, including those in India. By contrast, in Russia, it surprised nobody because all this thing has been breeding, well, in a broader sense, through a whole 30-year period after 1991, and in a narrower sense, since in 2007, Putin came forward with his famous Munich speech, in which he said that Russian security concerns are disregarded by the West, and something has to be done to correct that situation. Then, of course, we had the 2008, the crisis on the Caucasus, and Russia's confrontation with Georgia, and then the Bucharest NATO Assembly, where the issue of membership for Ukraine and Georgia was discussed, and ever since that time, all this was hanging in the air with a lot of support given by the West, specifically to Ukraine, to practically transform it into a permanent strategic irritant for Russia. Then, of course, you had the coup. The coup in Ukraine in 2014, and then the Crimean reintegration into Russia, and ever since, for the next 8 years, what we have seen was already an undeclared war by Ukrainian government against those areas of Ukraine which disagreed with its policies and wanted to go their own way. This war, by the way, right at the time when we are discussing what's happening in the territory of Ukraine itself, this war is in full swing once again, and the artillery shelling that is given by the whom I would dare call Ukro-Nazis, to Donetsk and Lugansk is absolutely astonishing.
Right.
And Russian prosecutor general has already announced that there will be a persecution of people who are conducting this as military criminals. So this is just
Russia has been maintaining since the last 1 week that it's not the civilians that we really want to target, but we do know that it's far from the truth, because we've seen hospitals, maternity wards, schools that have also been targets of missile strikes. I thank you all, gentlemen, for joining us here on this broadcast with your perspective. Our rolling coverage on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, of course, continues on Times Now. A quick break, back in just 2 minutes.